Welcome to Data Beats. Today, Luke Ambrosetti, the head of solutions engineering at MessageGears, is here to answer some questions about warehouse native apps. So, here we go. Hey, Luke, thanks for joining.
Hey, Arpit, great to see you again.
Yeah, you too. Well, let's jump right in, Luke. First question for you. Please tell us,
Sure.
what is the warehouse native app?
Yeah, so a warehouse native app is effectively a SaaS, application that is going through and doing a data intensive process for you and connects directly to the data warehouse.
All right, so are connected apps or data apps the same as warehouse native apps?
That's a good question. Kind of, it depends on who you ask, right? The definition of a connected app or a data app could be very different, to people. And in my view, I'm seeing connected app as kind of a good definition of a warehouse native, SaaS app. Whereas data app could be, it could be it could be that thing, but maybe data app is actually a larger term that incorporates, maybe an internal app that you create at your own, at the company you work for. Could be a data app, right? It doesn't have to be some sort of external tool that you buy and or use.
Cool. Yeah, that makes sense. So, please tell us what is leading to such a paradigm shift in the way B2B SaaS tools are being built.
Yeah, and it's very exciting, right? Lots of new companies are taking this new approach, right? This, it's called warehouse native, warehouse centric, warehouse first, right? Approach. Lots of terms for it. Um, but honestly, it comes from this idea of the separation of compute and storage, right? And then specifically, kind of in the industry that I work in, which is more marketing, is this idea of that I've seen it explained very well. Is this idea of the separation of the system of engagement, right? Of how you're reaching out to, in this case, the marketing's case, your customers, right? And the system of record of and where what is the state of that customer, what they're doing, where they are, the customer 360 as it's called. So with those two things separated, or traditionally, I should say, you've had to get your data to your system, whatever your system of engagement is, right? And sometimes, companies like Salesforce have traditionally tried to be both the system of record and the system of engagement. So now it's with the separation of compute and storage, right? You can now have those two things, the system of engagement, the system of record separated as well.
Cool. Okay, so besides cost savings, what are some key benefits of using a warehouse native engagement tool over a traditional one?
Yeah. So yeah, and again, the cost savings aspect right here is the idea that you don't have to sync that data right to whatever your other platform is of where you want to do either that in whether it's if it's marketing, it's engagement, or maybe it's analytics. You don't have to sync that data there either, whatever it might be, right? So that's where the cost savings comes from. But there's so many other benefits as well, right? So it's you know you have fewer data silos. You do it this way, right? You instead of shipping your data out to 10 different SaaS companies, if all 10 could connect to your data warehouse and use that system of record, there's so less, there's you don't have to duplicate data, I guess is what I'm trying to say, right? So it's a single source of truth, of course, as well. And that's going to be better, especially for like things like data observability or analytics, right? Being able to attribute different events that happen back to again where you have all of your data sitting instead of it again being in a silo that you have to then extract with an ETL tool. You get to bring many of these warehouse native cases. You get to bring your own data model. So instead of having to force your data model into kind of how they view the world or how they think your data should be modeled, it's you get to bring your own, which is great. Also, it's onboarding time, right? Instead of having again same thing with the bring your own data model. You don't have to spend days or no days, months, honestly, sometimes years mapping out, how the data should be modeled in that destination system. Again, on the time saving, you have, speed of change, right? You wanted to add a specific field, right, to whatever you're trying to do. It's easy. It shows up in the data warehouse or the database. It's right there for you to use. And then lastly, is from a security and compliance point of view, your data is safe in the data warehouse, right? You're not having to rely on these SaaS providers to keep your data safe. So if you have, PII data, especially on customers, might come from a marketing, space. That data is much more safe at home.
Right. Cool. Yeah. Cool. That makes sense. So, are warehouse native apps making reverse ETL workflows redundant?
Yes, kind of. Yeah. I mean, so the answer, of course, is yes and no, right? Um, I'd say it makes reverse ETL redundant and ETL because again, you're not having to kind of sync data in between the source system and the destination system, right? Your source system is your system of record, and that's what you get to use. So both the reverse ETL and the EL or ETL tools can be, you get replaced. That said, I think it's, does it, is that going to replace them forever? No, I don't think so. I think that, this approach is really cool and great, but there are, some companies, like when I think again in marketing, you think about like Facebook conversions API or Google Ads, right? I don't think they have any reason to take this approach, right? You're still gonna have to use their APIs because that's what they need, right, to do their business. So I don't think those reverse ETL and EL tools are going to be completely gone.
Cool. Yeah. That made a lot of sense. I'm totally with you on that. So,
Mhm.
can you tell us about the segmentation capabilities of a warehouse native engagement tool? And are there any limitations here?
Yeah, and so again, I work at MessageGears, and MessageGears is traditionally an email service provider, and that's kind of been our core feature is connecting directly to the data warehouse, right? So with this type of architecture or design, the limitation is that you do have to have a data model, right? In marketing, many companies rely on their ESPs or sometimes their traditional CDPs to do that for them, right? So you need to have a data model because and you can't just take these tools like data ingestion tools like a Snowplow or RudderStack and and just throw data into a data warehouse, right? You need those resources, you need those people, right, to go through and intelligently design models for your end customers or marketing in this case, maybe sales to use, right? Um, so when the data team does that, right, for their end customers, again, the marketing team, it gives those data adjacent teams the ability to use that data and kind of do that last mile transformation that they need to do to run what they need to run in their programs. So it's for low or no code tools, right? It's going to be very much a challenge to take this approach, right? Because again, you have to basically say, okay, bring your here's your data model, bring your data model, and now make it work with the solution we have. The big reason some of those cloud SaaS are so popular is because they make it really easy and they provide that data model for those those low code tools to use.
Cool. Yeah. So, why don't you tell us about the visual segmentation capabilities? Can the visual segmentation capability eventually replace the need to build data models in SQL?
Yeah, that's a good question. Maybe I think we'll get there, but right now you still need some base SQL, right, or some sort of base model to work from. Again, those data adjacent users can go through and use those tools to do segmentation and do some really cool segmentation. Honestly, at least in our platform, um, to do some very complex segments and groups and labeling to go through and target their customers or their users. You know, at the same time, it's again, it's more of that last mile approach where they're kind of adding in the things that they need, but they need for now they need to start from somewhere, right? They need to have what I would call like a base model to work from, um, and from there they can go through and then create the kind of do some kind of I guess additional modeling on top of that.
Yeah, cool. That makes sense. So, if warehouse native apps don't store any customer data, won't marketing campaigns sometimes break when there's an issue connecting to the customer's warehouse?
Yeah, I get this. I've got this question a couple times now from some more of the technical users or prospects, and the answer is yes, but at worst, it's the same as or better than your typical SaaS model, right? So with your typical SaaS model, you have to have pipelines, and again, now reverse ETL making it a lot easier and getting your data synced. But for example, right, as a easy example here, let's say you're going to send you want to send an email campaign to all the users who subscribed yesterday. If that pipeline breaks, then you could, if your SaaS company isn't looking at the freshness of that data every day, you could be sending that message to the exact same users again, right? And the same kind of thing works here. Whereas is at least in this method, um, if it breaks, it breaks and nothing's going to be going out, right? Whereas if your SaaS company is not looking at data freshness, right, something could break, and then you're giving a bad experience to customers because you're sending them the exact same content twice.
Right, right. That's really interesting. I never thought of that, Luke. So thanks for sharing. Last question for you, Luke. What is that? What is the one piece of advice you have for companies that are looking to just get started with a data warehouse?
Yeah, I would say start slow, right? Don't try and just jump in, head first. There's so many tools. So the modern data stack is so cool. It's got, lots of functionality, lots of cool features that people are doing today. Um, at the same time, you have to start slow. It's a crawl, walk, run approach, right, to this. Chatting with one of our enterprise clients who was talking about their move into BigQuery, and it took them 3 years. 3 years, I think, from Teradata, kind of on prem, and so it can take a long time. So you have to have before you start doing the really cool AI ML stuff, you have to have your ingestion, your modeling, your transformations figured out. So yeah, start slow, and yeah, have fun with it.
Cool. Yeah. Like I tell people, you got to build a minimum viable data stack before aiming for a modern data stack. Well, thank you,
Right.
Luke. Thanks for answering my question and sharing your insights. Have a great day.
Thanks, Arpit. You too.
Evaluating data solutions, explore the modern data landscape on asterisk.com.